It started on a sun-bright Tuesday in early June, the kind of suburban morning when sprinklers hiss across manicured lawns and everyone waves like they're living inside a real estate brochure. I was standing on my porch, mug of coffee in hand, when I saw her again, Karen Morrison, the president of our HOA, striding down the sidewalk with her clipboard like she owned the whole neighborhood. I'd lived in Haven Ridge for 5 years. Bought my home there because it was quiet, safe, predictable, or at least it used to be before Karen took over. She wasn't elected so much as she declared herself in charge after the last president moved away. And somehow nobody challenged her. She wore her authority like perfume, thick, cloying, impossible to ignore. That morning she was talking to 2 HOA enforcement assistants and a couple of retirees, in navy shirts printed with HOA staff across the chest as they pointed toward my yard. I knew what this was about before. She even opened her mouth. Last weekend, I'd built a small cedar fence on the side of my property, entirely within the boundary lines. I'd measured it twice, filed the paperwork, paid the permit fee, even emailed the HOA months earlier. No reply. So I built it. Now, here she was, marching up my driveway with that same self-righteous energy she carried everywhere. "Ethan Cole," she called out, her voice slicing through the soft hum of lawnmowers. "We need to discuss this unsanctioned construction." I sighed, setting my mug on the railing. "Morning, Karen. It's not unsanctioned. I submitted all the forms back in March." She smiled the way a cat smiles at a trapped bird. "I have no record of that. You can't just make modifications without written HOA approval." I gestured toward the fence. "It's inside my property line, 6 feet high, cedar panels. County regulations are fine with it." I followed the book. Karen tilted her head, feigning sympathy. "Well, the HOA's book is thicker, Ethan. We have community standards." Behind her, the 2 staffers nodded like background dancers in a bad commercial. One of them held a camera, snapping photos of my fence from every angle. "Is this really necessary?" I asked. "Documentation," Karen replied sweetly. "We'll be issuing a violation notice this week. There'll be a fine, probably around $500. I laughed, but it came out harder than I meant. "You're kidding." Her smile froze. "Do I look like I'm kidding?" That was the first real crack in the calm veneer of Haven Ridge. The violation notice came 2 days later, printed on HOA letterhead, slipped under my door like a threat. Unauthorized structure, non-compliant design, removal required within 7 days. I called the number on the letter, and it went straight to voicemail. I emailed twice. Nothing. Then Friday afternoon, I caught movement through the blinds. Karen herself stepping into my backyard. No knock, no permission, just walking straight in like she owned the place. "Hey!" I shouted, storming out the back door. She jumped, spinning around. "Oh, Ethan, you startled me." "What are you doing in my yard?" "I'm measuring. The HOA board needs precise data for our file." "You're trespassing." She frowned, clutching her clipboard tighter. "It's community property once visible from public areas." "That's not how property law works," I said sharply. "Step out. Now." For a moment she looked like she might argue, but something in my voice must have landed because she huffed and stomped back toward the gate. "This hostility will be reflected in your compliance record," she warned. I closed the gate behind her and locked it. That was the moment something in me shifted. I'd tolerated her emails, her rules about mailbox colors and lawn height, even the absurd approved Christmas light schedule. But walking into my yard without permission, that crossed a line. That weekend I started gathering everything. Emails, dated forms, copies of permits, a neat digital trail proving I'd followed every rule. I even pulled satellite images showing the fence line was well within my property. My friend Nora, who worked as a local reporter, stopped by Sunday evening. We'd known each other since college. She listened while I vented, sipping lemonade on the porch. "She walked into your yard?" Nora asked. "Yep. No knock, nothing." "That's a privacy violation," she said, already pulling out her phone. "You mind if I look into the HOA filings? These things have to register their bylaws with the county." "Please do," I said. "Maybe you'll find out which part of the Constitution gives her the right to measure my grass." She laughed, but her reporter's instinct had already kicked in. "You might want to record everything from now on." By Monday, things escalated. A bright orange HOA notice was taped to my garage door. Final warning, immediate removal required. I took a picture of it and emailed Karen directly. Her reply came within minutes. "Ethan, Your continued non-compliance undermines community harmony. Failure to remove the fence will result in daily fines and possible lien action. I stared at the words lien action until my hands started shaking. She was threatening my home over a legal fence. I replied, "Karen, step on my property again and I'll call the police." She didn't answer. Instead, the next morning I found her again outside, standing at the curb, talking to a neighbor while pointing at my house. That's when I realized she wasn't just enforcing rules. She was building an audience. When Nora called me that night, her voice buzzed with excitement. "You're gonna love this," she said. "Turns out the HOA hasn't filed a proper budget or meeting record in 3 years. That's a huge violation of state HOA law." My heart thudded. "You're serious?" "Completely. And your Karen has been collecting fees from residents without legal authorization. I'm writing a piece on it, but I need you on record." I hesitated. "On record? As in name and face?" "Yeah. You're the only one who's willing to stand up to her. I'll protect you legally. I've got the documents." For a long minute I just stared out the window at the dark street, sprinklers misting under streetlights. Then I said, "Do it. I'm done letting her bully everyone." The story aired 3 days later on Channel 7 News. Local HOA under fire for unlawful practices. There was footage of my fence, my interview, and even clips of Karen refusing to answer questions outside the HOA office. Within hours, the neighborhood group chat exploded. Some people thanked me. Others called me a troublemaker. But by sunset, Karen's perfect composure cracked. She posted a furious statement accusing me of defamation and malicious interference. That night, someone egged my mailbox. I didn't sleep much. The next morning, as I walked out to clean the mess, I saw 2 police cruisers parked by the community center. Karen stood there red-faced and trembling, shouting at one of the officers. She pointed toward my house. The officer walked over. "Mr. Cole?" "Yes, sir." "Ms. Morrison claims you've been harassing her online." I blinked. "Harassing? She's been trespassing, threatening fines, and now she's lying to police." He looked uncomfortable. "We're just taking statements for now." Behind him, Karen was glaring daggers. I pulled out my phone, showing him the video from my security camera. Karen stepping into my yard, clipboard in hand. The officer watched silently. Then he nodded. "Yeah, that's trespassing. We'll file this properly." When he turned back to Karen, her expression fell apart. That was the day the power shifted. The HOA board called an emergency meeting the next week. Half the neighborhood showed up. Cameras, reporters, angry homeowners demanding answers. Nora covered it live for the evening news. Karen tried to defend herself, claiming she'd acted in the best interest of the community. But every sentence was drowned out by residents yelling about unfair fines, missing funds, and her constant bullying. By the time the meeting ended, the board voted no confidence. Karen Morrison was removed as president effective immediately. That should have been the end of it. But people like her don't disappear quietly. 2 days later, a letter arrived, certified mail. It was from her attorney. Defamation lawsuit pending. Damages sought, $150,000. I laughed when I saw it. Not because it was funny, but because I couldn't believe the audacity. I sent the whole packet to Nora, who passed it to her network's legal team. Within 48 hours, their coverage doubled, exposing how she was using HOA funds to pay for private legal actions. By the end of the week, the state attorney general's office announced an investigation into Haven Ridge HOA. The night the story broke nationwide, my phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Messages, calls, strangers thanking me for standing up to HOA Karens everywhere. Outside, the neighborhood was quiet for the first time in months. I sat on the porch again. Same spot, same mug of coffee, this time cold and untouched. Freedom has a sound. It's the silence after a storm. For the first time, I realized I hadn't just built a fence. I'd built a line she couldn't cross. I thought the lawsuit was the end of Karen's obsession, but I underestimated how deep her ego ran. When someone builds their whole identity around control, losing it feels like death to them. She disappeared from public view for almost 2 weeks, and during that time, Haven Ridge felt peaceful. No violation letters, no HOA patrol trucks idling at the curb, no glares from clipboard holders. Neighbors started coming out again. Kids rode bikes without helmets, a previous HOA offense. People repainted their doors whatever color they liked, and the community suddenly felt alive. Then one morning, I woke to the sound of a drone buzzing outside my window. At first, I thought I was dreaming. But when I stepped out, coffee in hand, I saw it, a small white drone hovering above my backyard. Camera blinking. I recorded it on my phone, followed it with my eyes as it flew back toward the row of houses on the east side, right where Karen lived. My jaw tightened. I'd installed cameras after the trespass incident, but this was something new. I texted Nora the footage. Within minutes, she replied, she's collecting evidence, probably trying to rebuild a case. Don't react yet. Document everything. By noon, 2 more neighbors texted me saying they'd seen the same drone over their houses. One even found a tiny microphone clipped near their fence. It was like Karen's ghost still ruled the streets, only now she was working in shadows. That night, I walked to her house. Porch lights on, blinds closed, one faint TV glow behind the curtains. I stood on the sidewalk, heart hammering. Then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw a movement, her curtain shifting slightly. She was watching me. I raised my phone and snapped a picture, not as a threat, as proof. When I turned to leave, I heard her voice through the cracked window. Keep it up, Ethan. You'll regret it. The words sliced through the quiet. The next morning, I went straight to the county police station. The officer behind the desk recognized me immediately, the HOA guy from the news. More trouble? He asked. Possible harassment, I said, showing him the drone footage. He frowned. That's invasion of privacy. If you can link it to her, she's in serious violation. But we'll need more than speculation. So, I bought my own drone. For a week, I watched her house. Same model, same range. And on the 4th night, I caught her husband launching theirs right from their back patio. The video was crystal clear. I forwarded it straight to the officer, who sent it to their legal department. Within 2 days, they issued a warning notice to the Morrisons. But Karen was never the type to take warnings seriously. On the 5th day, I woke to chaos. A bright red "for sale" sign had been hammered into my front lawn, without my permission, and taped to my mailbox was a letter, printed and unsigned. This neighborhood doesn't need people like you. Sell and leave before we make it harder. I stood there, staring at the words, while neighbors peeked through their blinds. Some sympathetic, some scared. It was the kind of moment that makes you feel completely alone. The quiet hostility of a community that's too polite to help. I called Nora again. She didn't hesitate. We're escalating this. I'm going to national with it. The next week, Channel 7's story turned into a segment on Good Morning America. They framed it perfectly. Homeowner fights HOA harassment after exposing corruption. My phone exploded again, but this time not with local neighbors. People from across the country wrote to me. Hundreds of emails from homeowners who'd faced the same abuse from their own HOA boards. Some stories were worse. A veteran fined for a flagpole. A single mom threatened with foreclosure over garden plants. The pattern was the same everywhere. Small power, unchecked ego, and nobody to hold them accountable. That's when I realized this wasn't just my fight anymore. A week later, the state attorney general's office subpoenaed the HOA's financial records. When they went through them, what they found shocked everyone. Karen had been using HOA funds to pay for landscaping on her personal property, her private security system, even her gym membership. The total, nearly $87,000, the news broke like wildfire. The same neighbors who once stayed silent now stood outside her house holding signs. HOA, abuse of power. Justice for homeowners. I stayed out of it. I didn't need to join the crowd. My part was already done. But late that night, I looked out my window and saw something that chilled me. Her house was dark, but her car was gone. She wasn't home. Around midnight, motion alerts triggered on my phone. Backyard camera. I opened the feed, and there she was. Karen Morrison. Standing behind my fence with a flashlight, face pale and twisted in anger. She was muttering something I couldn't hear, waving a piece of paper in her hand. Then she slipped it through a crack in the fence and disappeared into the dark. I didn't move for a full minute, frozen between disbelief and rage. Then I went outside. The paper was damp from dew. It was another letter, handwritten this time. You think you won? You just started something bigger than you can control. The next day, the police picked her up for trespassing again. this time with video evidence. When they brought her in, she broke down completely. She admitted everything, the misuse of funds, the intimidation, even the fake notices. Said she did it because she refused to let the neighborhood fall apart. When the court date came, half the town showed up. The same people she'd once intimidated now testified against her. The judge gave her 6 months probation, community service, and a permanent restraining order from approaching any HOA member, especially me. As I walked out of the courthouse that afternoon, Nora met me on the steps. Cameras flashed behind her, reporters shouted questions, but all I could do was smile. "You did it," she said. "No," I replied. "We did." That night I sat in my backyard again, the same place where it all began. The fence glowed gold under the porch light. The air was quiet. For the first time in months, I wasn't waiting for another notice or letter. I wasn't looking over my shoulder. The fight had taken something from me. Time, peace, trust. But it had given me something bigger. A voice. And maybe that's what justice really is. Not about winning, but about being heard when someone tries to silence you. I picked up my phone. Opened the news article Nora sent. HOA president found guilty of misuse and trespassing. Underneath, comments poured in. This man deserves a medal. Finally. Someone stood up to these HOA tyrants. Justice echo, that's what we need everywhere. That last one made me smile. Because they were right. Justice echoes, if someone's brave enough to start the sound. The months after the trial felt strangely quiet. Almost too quiet. The kind of silence that doesn't settle. It lingers, waiting for something else to happen. Neighbors were still polite but cautious. People waved from a distance, whispered when they thought I wasn't listening. I'd become the guy who took down the HOA. It sounded heroic online, but in real life, it carried a different weight. Some people were grateful. Others just wanted things to go back to the way they were. Predictable, controlled, HOA approved. Nora kept urging me to use the momentum. "You could turn this into something bigger, Ethan," she said over lunch one afternoon. "A podcast, maybe a blog. People need stories like this." I laughed. "I'm not a media guy. I just wanted to be left alone." "Yeah, but that's the point. You're not chasing attention. That's why people trust you." She wasn't wrong. The emails hadn't stopped. Every day, people wrote to me from different states. Desperate homeowners dealing with corrupt HOAs, asking for advice or just someone to listen. It started to feel less like a story and more like a mission. Then one evening, around early September, something strange happened. A white envelope appeared in my mailbox. No return address, just my name written in blue ink. Inside was a short note and a small flash drive. "You think Karen was the only one?" I froze, turning the flash drive over in my hand. It looked new. No markings, no label. I plugged it into my laptop, carefully, offline, and opened the single video file inside. It was security footage, grainy but clear enough. Karen's husband, David Morrison, sitting at a dining table with 2 other men. Papers, cash envelopes, and what looked like HOA meeting documents spread between them. They were talking about kickbacks for approved construction, projects, hundreds of dollars in expedited permits. I watched the full 2 minutes in stunned silence. When it ended, the screen went black, replaced by a single image of a familiar street. Haven Ridge Main Road, right outside the HOA office. Time-stamped last week, I called Nora immediately. She came over within the hour, laptop in hand, face lit by the glow of my monitor. "Who sent this?" she asked. No clue. No postmark, just that note. She watched the footage twice, then leaned back, exhaling. "This isn't just corruption and it's fraud. That's HOA money they're skimming. And if this is recent, it means Karen wasn't working alone. Do you think the husband's still running things behind the scenes?" Nora nodded slowly. "Wouldn't be the first time. You up for one more round?" I looked at her. Part of me tired, another part burning again. "Yeah," I said. "Let's finish what she started." That weekend, Nora and I met with 2 of the newly elected HOA board members at a local diner. They were younger, nervous but genuine. One of them, Sarah, admitted they'd been struggling since the scandal. "Half our records are missing," she said quietly. "Budgets, invoices, even emails. It's like Karen scrubbed everything before she left. Or someone helped her," I added. They both looked uneasy. Nora explained what we'd found. The flash drive, The footage, the possible financial link to David Morrison. Sarah's eyes widened. If that's true, the state might reopen the case. That's the plan, Nora said. We sent the footage to the Attorney General's office. 2 days later, they confirmed it was authentic and part of a larger investigation already underway. Apparently, several HOAs across the county were showing the same pattern. Unfiled budgets, fake invoices, inflated maintenance fees, all connected to one private company, Civic Point Management, which handled consulting services for community associations. And the regional manager of Civic Point, David Morrison. My heart sank when I heard his name again. It wasn't over. The following week, reporters started digging into Civic Point's connections. Nora led the coverage, her name now trending across local and national outlets. Karen had been the face, the puppet president. But behind her was an entire network making money off fake compliance fees and rigged maintenance contracts. For months, homeowners had been paying thousands of dollars into an invisible funnel, and nobody questioned it because it came stamped with the HOA logo. Until now. When the first raid happened at Civic Point's downtown office, I stood across the street watching news vans swarm. It was surreal, like watching the final chapter of a movie I never meant to star in. Officers carried boxes of files and computers out of the building. David Morrison was led away in handcuffs. That night, I got another email. No subject, no sender name, just a message that read, "You're poking at something that doesn't stop with one company. Be careful who you trust." Attached was a photo, grainy surveillance stills of me and Nora talking outside the diner. Someone was watching us. I felt the hair on my arms stand up. I showed Nora, and she just stared at the screen, silent. Then she said softly, "We're onto something bigger than HOA fines now. Ethan, this is organized fraud." We both knew what came next wouldn't be safe. Within a week, Nora's story aired nationally, a 3-part expose called The HOA Machine. It detailed how a network of consulting firms and law offices worked together to exploit HOA regulations across multiple states. The scale was massive, millions of dollars redirected from homeowners into private accounts, and the face of the story, once again, was mine. My name, my photo, my street. The moment it hit TV, my phone blew up all over again, but not just with praise this time. I started getting threats. Emails saying I'd ruined lives, messages from fake accounts warning me to stop before you disappear. I forwarded everything to the police, but even they seemed uneasy. "This is big money, Mr. Cole," one detective said. "These aren't just angry neighbors anymore." For a while, I thought about backing out, about going quiet and letting it fade. But then I remembered standing on my porch that first morning. Karen walking up my driveway like she owned the ground beneath my feet. That feeling of being powerless in your own home. That's what had started all this, and I wasn't about to let it end that way. So I went public again, gave one last interview, this time live on national television. I didn't talk about fear or revenge. I talked about accountability, about communities being hijacked by people who use power as a weapon. I said, it's not about fences or lawns. It's about freedom. The right to feel safe in your own yard without someone using a rule book as a threat. The studio went silent. The host looked stunned. Then the clip went viral. By winter, the federal investigation had expanded to 7 states. Civic Point collapsed completely. Hundreds of local HOAs dissolved or restructured. New homeowner rights groups formed, many calling themselves Justice Echo chapters. I never asked for that name, but I couldn't deny it gave me a strange sense of pride. Karen's house sold quietly in December. Rumor was she and David had filed for divorce after the scandal. I didn't care where they went, only that they were gone. One snowy morning, as I stood by my window sipping coffee, I saw Sarah, the new HOA president, walking up my path with a small box in her hands. She smiled nervously when I opened the door. "I just wanted to say thank you," she said, and return this. Inside the box was the original HOA plaque, the metal one Karen used to hang outside her office. I stared at it for a moment, then laughed. "You're sure you don't want to keep it?" She shook her head. "I think it belongs with the guy who reminded everyone what accountability means." Later that evening, I hung the plaque in my garage, not as a trophy, but as a reminder. Because justice isn't something you win once. It's something you defend every day, with truth, patience, and the courage to say no when everyone else stays quiet. And as I turned off the light, I noticed something small carved into the bottom of the plaque, something I'd never seen before. 3 faint words scratched into the metal. Justice Echo begins. By Monday morning, the neighborhood felt colder. People who used to wave when I walked my dog now looked away. Word had spread that I'd humiliated Karen by sending her a cease and desist letter. The HOA Facebook group was on fire, posts accusing me of attacking a volunteer and creating drama. I didn't even have to check to know Karen had planted half of them. At first, I thought about replying, posting the video clips, showing exactly what had happened when she trespassed. But I held back. I wanted every move to count. One mistake and she'd twist it against me. Instead, I documented everything. Photos of my fence, timestamps, voicemails, even the sarcastic note she left taped to my mailbox saying, "Let's try to be neighborly again." That week, I started noticing the small retaliations. A warning ticket about improper trash can placement. A complaint about my porch light being too bright. Then someone, definitely one of her HOA buddies, reported that my grass was a 1/4 inch too high. Each notice had her initials at the bottom, approved by K. Renshaw. It almost became a pattern I could predict. Every morning I'd wake up, make coffee, check my email, and there it was, another HOA message. My stomach would tighten before I even opened it, but I forced myself to smile, document it, and move on. Karen didn't know it, but she was building my case for me. One evening, I came home to find a white SUV parked halfway across my driveway, the same HOA logo on the side door. Karen stood there with a clipboard, arguing with a landscaping crew she'd apparently brought to inspect my property line. I walked over, camera already recording on my phone. "Karen, what are you doing here again?" "Ethan, we received multiple complaints that your fence is encroaching on the green strip owned by the community," she said, tone dripping with authority she didn't actually have. "The green strip, you mean, the one I maintain, that the HOA refuses to mow?" "That's not the point. We're just ensuring compliance. You're trespassing again. You need to leave." She crossed her arms. "You can't talk to me like that. I represent the homeowners." I gestured toward the no trespassing sign. That sign represents the law. When I posted the footage online that night, I didn't expect what happened next. Within hours, the clip hit 20,000 views. Comments poured in, strangers from all over sharing their own HOA horror stories, cheering me on, calling her HOAKaren. It was the first time I'd felt the tide turning. By the weekend, local news picked it up. A small station ran a short segment titled, "Homeowner Claims HOA Harassment. Viral Video Sparks Debate." They asked for an interview. I said yes. Sitting under the bright lights of the studio, I told the story calmly, how she had trespassed, how the HOA abused minor rules to intimidate people, how communities like ours were supposed to bring neighbors together, not divide them. The reporter nodded along, clearly recognizing the pattern. When the clip aired, everything changed. Karen's smile at board meetings faded. Neighbors who'd avoided me started stopping by again, thanking me for standing up to her. One even slipped me a folder of HOA emails that Karen had sent, mocking residents behind their backs. It was pure gold, but victory didn't come without backlash. Karen doubled down. She filed a special motion accusing me of defamation and public endangerment. Her lawyer delivered it personally, a thin man in a gray suit who smirked when he handed me the envelope. I opened it at the kitchen table. Heart pounding. The language was dense, legalistic, but the message was clear. They wanted to scare me into silence. Instead, I called my friend Julia, a local journalist I'd met years earlier. She answered on the second ring. "Ethan, I saw your interview." That woman looked unhinged. "She's trying to sue me now. And let's make it bigger. National bigger." Within days, Julia's outlet picked it up, a national online news platform with millions of readers. The headline hit harder than I expected. HOA president trespasses on homeowner's property, faces backlash after viral video. That morning, I stood by my window watching Karen's SUV crawl past my house, her face tight with anger. She saw the reporters parked nearby, their cameras glinting in the sunlight, and she sped off. I could have stopped there. But I'd learned something through this whole mess. People like her don't stop unless you make them answer publicly. So I began collecting statements from other neighbors she'd harassed. Late at night, over coffee and hushed voices, they told me their stories. The elderly couple fined for planting sunflowers. The single mom threatened with foreclosure over a missing mailbox number. The disabled veteran denied a ramp because it didn't fit the community aesthetic. Each story was worse than the last, and I wrote them all down. When I sent the compilation to Julia, she called me back within an hour. "Ethan, this isn't a neighborhood dispute anymore. This is a pattern of abuse." "Exactly," I said. "It's time people saw what these HOAs can become when they're run by bullies." A week later, the segment aired nationwide. Footage of Karen shouting at me at my fence played side by side with interviews from neighbors and experts. The anchor ended with a single line that hit harder than anything I could have scripted. Sometimes the greatest power in a neighborhood isn't the HOA, it's the courage of one resident who says enough. That night, I stood on my porch as the glow from the television screens flickered through the windows of houses around the cul-de-sac. For the first time in months, it was quiet. No emails, no warnings, just silence, and the faint hum of sprinklers down the street. Karen hadn't resigned yet, but she didn't need to. Her authority was gone. I took a deep breath, the cool air carrying a sense of finality. But deep down, I knew this wasn't over. Not until she faced consequences for every person she'd bullied, and I wasn't about to stop now. The following week felt almost too quiet. No new warnings, no letters, no Karen standing at my property line pretending to measure fence posts. The silence itself made me uneasy. People like her didn't retreat. They recalculated. I kept documenting everything, backing up every email and text. My gut told me she was building something behind the scenes. And I wasn't wrong. One Thursday morning, I woke up to find a bright orange notice stapled to my front door. HOA emergency meeting. Subject, community conduct and media relations. Underneath, Karen's signature in big, self-important loops. The meeting was scheduled for that evening at the community clubhouse, the same sterile building, with beige walls and those plastic chairs that always squeaked when you sat down. By the time I got there, the parking lot was packed. News had drawn everyone out. Even the neighbors who usually avoided HOA meetings were sitting in the back rows, whispering. Karen sat at the front table, flanked by two board members, both clearly uncomfortable. Her face was tight, the kind of smile you wear when you're about to lose control but want to pretend you're not. "Let's begin," she said sharply, tapping her pen on the table. "As most of you know, there's been recent negative attention brought to our community due to the actions of one homeowner." Every eye turned toward me. I didn't move. I wanted her to say it. Karen continued. "This individual's public videos and interviews have caused significant distress and reputational harm to our neighborhood. We as an HOA are considering appropriate disciplinary measures." A few gasps rippled through the room. Someone muttered, "Is she serious?" I stood. "Karen, you're talking about me, right?" "The homeowner whose property you trespassed on." Her smile faltered. "Ethan, this is not a discussion forum." "Then what is it?" "Another attempt to silence someone for standing up to you?" Murmurs started in the crowd. An elderly man in the second row spoke up. "He's right. Karen, you can't just keep finding people and calling it community harmony." Another voice joined in. "Yeah. You fined me $150 for leaving my bike by the garage." Within seconds, the room turned into a storm of voices, people venting years of bottled-up frustration. I watched her composure crack, that polished HOA calm replaced by raw panic. She slammed her gavel down, the sound echoing through the hall. "This meeting is adjourned." But it was too late. The crowd didn't stop. Cameras were rolling, cell phones were out. The whole thing was already halfway to the internet by the time I got home. That night, HOAKaren trended again, this time nationally. The clip from the meeting hit over 500,000 views in less than a day. The comments were brutal. Even people outside the country were chiming in, calling her the face of neighborhood tyranny. By Friday, my inbox exploded with messages, reporters, talk shows, even a lawyer who specialized in HOA reform cases. I ignored most of them until one caught my eye. Subject, legal assistance. I can help from Avery Morales. Civil rights attorney. Her email was short. Direct and powerful. "Mr. Cole, I've seen what's happening. You're not just fighting one HOA. You're standing up for thousands of homeowners who've been bullied the same way. If you want to make this right, I can make it national. I called her the next morning. She spoke with quiet confidence, the kind of voice that made you believe justice still had weight. "Ethan," she said, "you've got them cornered. But you need to finish it legally, not emotionally. We'll file a public misconduct complaint with the county, and I'll request all HOA financial records. If she's abused power this long, she's left a trail." That one line, "she's left a trail," stuck with me. A week later, we had our first court filing. The HOA board was officially under investigation for misuse of funds and harassment. Karen went from smug to desperate overnight. Suddenly, her carefully manicured front yard was empty, her car missing from its usual spot. But I wasn't celebrating yet, because I knew people like her don't crumble easily. They cling to power until the last screw is ripped out. 3 nights later, around 11 p.m., I heard a noise outside. I grabbed my flashlight, stepped onto the porch, and saw shadows moving near my fence. My stomach dropped. When I shined the light, Karen froze, standing there with 2 HOA staffers holding what looked like measuring tape. "Karen, it's 11 o'clock, I said, my voice steady but cold. "You're trespassing again." She didn't even try to deny it. "We're assessing property boundaries before the county review," she said quickly. "Without notice? Without consent?" Her face flushed. "You don't own the neighborhood, Ethan." "No," I said, "but I own my property. And the truth." I raised my phone, recording. She stormed off, muttering curses under her breath. By morning, the footage was online. The headline read, "HOA president caught trespassing, again, amid ongoing investigation." That was the nail in the coffin. Reporters swarmed the community. The board members resigned one by one, publicly distancing themselves from her. Within a week, Karen was suspended as HOA president pending review. But the final blow didn't come from me. It came from Avery. She called me one afternoon, voice calm but triumphant. "Ethan, you might want to turn on the news." I did, and there it was, a live report showing Karen walking out of the county courthouse, head down, refusing to answer questions about misappropriated community funds. Everything she'd built, her image, her control, her arrogance, collapsed in seconds. I watched it in silence, coffee going cold in my hand. For the first time in a long time, I felt peace, but this wasn't just about me anymore. I'd started hearing from people all over the country, letters, emails, even handwritten notes from homeowners who'd faced the same kind of bullying. They called me the guy who stood up, and maybe, for the first time, I believed it. The morning after the broadcast, I woke up to sunlight spilling through my window and a strange stillness that felt earned. My phone was buzzing nonstop. Messages from neighbors, from strangers, from media outlets I'd only ever watched on TV. For the first time since this nightmare began, I didn't feel cornered. I felt free. Then the emails started. Not hate mail this time. Thank you notes, one from a retired couple in Arizona. "You spoke for us. We've been fined for years for ridiculous reasons. Thank you." Another from a single mom in Florida. "Our HOA threatened to foreclose when my son put up a basketball hoop. Seeing your story made me realize I'm not alone." I sat there reading them one by one, realizing this was bigger than my own yard, my own fence, or my own neighborhood. Karen had been a symbol of control, but the real issue was how many like her existed, hiding behind HOA bylaws to bully people who just wanted peace in their own homes. Later that week, Avery called again. "Ethan, the county audit results are in," she said. "You might want to sit down." There was a pause. "She's been diverting HOA maintenance funds to a private landscaping company registered under her cousin's name. We've got invoices, emails, signatures, the whole trail." I couldn't even speak for a second. "So she's done?" "Completely," Avery said. "They'll likely press charges. Misuse of community funds, falsifying records, multiple counts of harassment. And thanks to your documentation, we can prove it all." It didn't feel like revenge. It felt like balance. When the county sheriff's office issued the warrant, I wasn't even there to see it. But a neighbor texted me a photo anyway. Karen standing on her porch, arms crossed, as officers walked her to a patrol car. The same SUV she used to patrol the streets now sat empty in her driveway. The video spread online before she even reached the station. People didn't just cheer, they felt seen. The comments were filled with stories of small-town battles, HOA injustices and quiet victories. That night, the local news played the footage alongside a statement from the board. We deeply regret the misconduct that occurred under our previous leadership and are implementing reforms effective immediately. I thought that would be the end of it. But Julia, the journalist who'd first believed my story, had one more idea. Ethan, she said, we're putting together a national segment, HOA Accountability in America. I want you in it. I hesitated. I'm not sure I want more cameras, she smiled. Then don't do it for you. Do it for everyone who can't. So I did. 2 weeks later, I found myself in a studio again. The same warm lights, the same steady hum of microphones. But this time I wasn't nervous. I spoke about what it means to stand up, about how one person's refusal to be bullied can ripple through an entire community. When it aired on national TV, my inbox filled again, but now with reporters asking to talk about HOA reform bills. Politicians began referencing the story. It became more than a headline. It became a movement. A few months later, I stood in front of the same clubhouse where it all began. The new board had invited everyone for an open forum, the first one that actually felt like a community meeting. People laughed, shared ideas, even argued politely. For the first time, it felt human again. One woman stood up and said, "We should thank Ethan for what he did." The room applauded, and I just nodded. Because this wasn't about fame. It was about fairness. When I walked home that evening, the sun was setting low over the rooftops, painting everything gold. The wind carried the sound of sprinklers, dogs barking, kids playing basketball. The normal things, the quiet things we fight to protect. I stopped by my fence, the same one that started it all. The wood still had faint marks where Karen once measured, searching for reasons to control. I ran my hand over it, smiling. In the distance, a moving truck was parked outside Karen's old house. She'd put it up for sale. Her reign was over. I didn't hate her, not anymore. People like her crave power because they're terrified of losing relevance. What I did hate was the system that allowed it to go unchecked. So I started something new. With Avery's help. We launched a nonprofit called Neighborhood Voices, an organization that helps homeowners fight unfair HOA practices. Within months, dozens of communities reached out for help. And slowly, stories began to change. That's when it hit me. Justice doesn't echo once. It reverberates. It travels from one backyard to another, one story to the next, until silence can't hold it anymore. The last time I saw Karen was by accident. I was leaving a cafe downtown when she walked past, wearing sunglasses, moving fast. Our eyes met for just a second. There was no anger left in her, only exhaustion, maybe even regret. I nodded. She didn't say a word. As I got into my car, the radio was playing the same news jingle I'd heard months earlier, the one that had once announced her downfall. Now it carried another story, a new HOA accountability bill inspired by viral cases nationwide. I smiled. For once, it didn't feel like revenge. It felt like change. And as I drove home down that familiar suburban street, the one she used to patrol like a queen, I couldn't help but whisper to myself, "This is my neighborhood, my home," and this time, justice echoed.